if it is a failure from a very successful person in the present,
Yeah.
you're happy to listen to the failure because it always has an ending which is pretty good.
Yeah.
But that's not reality.
Coming to you straight from Fremont, California, this is the Fremont Podcast, dedicated to telling the stories of the past and present of the people and places of the city of Fremont, one conversation at a time.
Hello, Fremont. This is Blue. You are listening to episode 75 of the Fremont Podcast.
Now, here's your host, Ricky B.
What is it?
Vinod.
Okay. Vinod?
Vinod.
Okay. And then Narayan?
Narayan.
Okay.
Narayan.
So I want to ask you about your life here in just a minute. And but you have a presence online. Penpositive?
Penpositive is my company. Yeah, that's right.
So it's a company.
It's a company that I registered some time back.
What is your elevator pitch for Penpositive? What do you do? What does it represent?
Something that I wrote long time back, but I've not been using it for a long time. It's the power of the pen is not in the color of ink it spills, but the power of the word it spells.
Wow, I love that.
You can write it with any color of ink.
Yeah, that's right.
But what you write is what matters.
That is really cool. And I think that what you just said is probably, as I ask you about your story and you tell your story, I'm probably going to hear more about how you got to that point where you talk about that. But at your logo, you have Penpositive, or be Penpositive, and then be content.
Yeah, so that's be content, be Penpositive.
Okay.
So content, obviously content creation, but there's also this concept of being content with what you have, right? Penpositive did not have any specific meaning, but I started writing blogs, so I was connected with the pen, and then it just sounded good.
Yeah,
and then I just put that.
You were content with that.
Yeah, and only after when the COVID started, the positive had a bad connotation to it because you don't want to be positive, right?
Right.
But then I said, okay, right.
That's fine. That's fine.
It.
Yeah. Time and events in history change meanings of words, and where they meant one thing at one point in time, they all of a sudden have a different meaning a decade later. So
that's right.
Yeah, that's fun. So I was just telling you before we started recording. I have a wonderful team that I work with. I have an editor, I have a personal assistant, I've got other people at work now with the podcast, and but I was mentioning that early on when I first started the Fremont Podcast, a lot of the people that I had on the podcast were just people that I met at the coffee shop or that I met around town. And then I just said, I love hearing your story. Can I invite you to be on the podcast? And so that's where a lot of them came from. And now the kind of the system that we have set up is we'll get somebody scheduled for the podcast, and then my team works to kind of get me resources for, how to lead the conversation and so on. But you and I kind of met casually through social media, right?
Yeah. So I do podcasts and I listen to podcasts. So I keep searching for what's there. And I found out Fremont Podcast. I didn't know there was something called Fremont Podcast. And then I started listening to it, and then I shared it with a colleague of mine who lives in Fremont. I said, have you heard? No, I've not heard that. And then I shared it with a few people and said, you know what, you've got a local podcast going on. It's and then I started listening to it, and I thought, you know what, I wanted to just meet you. You know, that was the whole idea. So just to put a face behind the words. So I said, let's meet. So,
we've kind of been, tossing around times and dates for the last few months to try to figure out when we could meet. And here we are. As a matter of fact, I mean, to be very candid, I think we decided yesterday that we were going to try to meet today. Right. And so this is very unplanned, but it has a history of kind of a planning in the making behind it. And you are a podcaster. You've been a podcaster long before I was a podcaster. Is that correct?
I have. So the first time I started, so I used to do a radio show a long time back.
Okay.
So that's when I first got in front of the mic.
Okay.
But then I started using Mixcloud and putting things before all this Anchor and Spotify and all those things.
Yeah.
And then I started podcasting very actively, probably in 2018.
Okay.
I think that's when I started, and I've been doing that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of platforms that you actually put out content. Like I was going through your Instagram account. You have a couple Instagram accounts, and I was going through that, listening to some of your talks, and they were really inspiring. And you have a YouTube channel that I also stalked you on, or I did some browsing on, and you have a lot of content out there. So one of the things that I in my research, or my late night stalking last night, I found a blog post that you did, and I think you did it a few years ago, but it had a timeline on there of your life. One thing that I found fascinating is you start out your timeline by the fact that you failed first grade.
Yeah.
You failed the first grade, and you write a little bit about that failure in that blog post. So tell me a little bit about that. How is that significant to you for where to where you are now?
So I think the main significance that I see is that people ask me this question. Right? That's the main significance, because other than that, I always had a feeling that, okay, I had failed in first grade, which means that everyone ahead of me, everyone my age is getting ahead of me. It was a feeling I had for quite a long time. Till I probably graduated my high school, so 12th, and then I got into my engineering college. That's when I found out there's a lot of people who come to engineering college after 1 year. They don't get they don't get into college in the first year. So you kind of started seeing a lot of people different age. It doesn't matter. And then as time went by, you figured out that, you know what, it really doesn't matter what you did in your, even 12th grade, even your college. I'm now past 50. So, so when you're 50, see, when you're in 20, you think 50 is very old.
That's true.
There's a long way to go. And when you say 50, you realize that it's only midway, because people don't retire nowadays.
Yeah.
Which means that after 30 years working, you've got another 30 years more, right? So 80 is, with all the things that's going on, people are, if you're physically and psychologically all active, then obviously.
Yeah.
So I think the reason I put that over there was because to remind me, you don't start with success, you start with failure, and then and it's not, you're never going to be escaping this whole concept of failure.
Yeah.
It's always going to be there.
Yeah.
It's about how many times, it's about how much can you handle in a year.
Yeah. That's right. So I love that, though. And it looks like that was the beginning of a very interesting, I would say even healthy journey for your life, right? As you started out in first grade and experiencing that failure. And obviously you probably would say that you've experienced a number of other failures since then. How have you learned from failure over your life?
See, when I look back, I very honestly sometimes feel I have not learned.
Okay.
To be honest, right? Everyone says people learn, and see, always people like to hear the stories of failure from people who are successful. No one likes to hear the story of failure from someone who is failed at the present. Because whenever you hear about failure, you connect with that person, but you want his present to be your future. Right?
That's true. Yeah.
And so if it is a failure from a very successful person in the present, you're happy to listen to the failure because it always has an ending which is pretty good.
Yeah.
But that's not reality. That's not reality, because it's all in our mind, and you can be all successful to the entire world, but you can feel very, very failed. I wouldn't say failure, because failure is an event and not a person. So, but you can feel.
That's good. I like that.
That you failed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But failure is an event that happens.
Yeah.
It's not. we say you are a failure. That's when you make it a person.
It's an identification almost.
Identification, right?
Yeah, right.
And this happens individually to us also. I mean, there's so many times, I mean, once every week I would think.
Yeah.
You do something and say, what a failure am I, right?
Yeah.
Then you kind of think about it and you say, so I don't know, I might have learned.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
I've not documented it.
Yeah.
But I tell people when I see something, I say, you know what? I failed that.
Yeah.
I got laid off in March.
Okay.
So first thing I did was that I made a video saying that I got laid off. It was surprise for a lot of people because they said, why do you say? I said, I'm laid off, and getting laid off is, at least in the Silicon Valley, it's a part of the life that we live here.
Right. It's like the death and growing cycle of like a garden. Like at the end, everything dies, it goes into the ground, and then, and that's the way it is in Silicon Valley. You get a job. Yeah. You get a job and you work it for a little while and then it goes away. Yeah.
Exactly. And I said, see, unless I tell I'm laid off and I am looking for a job, how do people know? I mean, it's not like people are always trying to figure out who is there.
Yeah.
There's so many people out there.
Yeah.
How do people I know that, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's more important to be very honest and transparent about the human you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Human being you are, right?
Yeah.
We live in so much of things are, we live in a social media. I mean, we know how it is in social media.
Right.
Everything, I'm not saying that everyone wants to look the way they want to look.
Yeah.
But that's all fine.
Yeah.
But when we go through it, we should understand that that's not the raw self, right? Mm-hmm. And I want to show what's my raw self. So that's why when you said that, tell me if you want to take anything out of it, I said, no.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I do podcasts, I don't edit.
Yeah, yeah.
I say, I cough, I sneeze.
Yeah.
I said, if I'm going to talk to you, I'm going to cough.
Yeah.
I'm going to sneeze.
That's good. Yeah.
Otherwise, I will be replaced by AI or something, which will do it, which will speak exactly the way
it'll be
I'm
nice
speaking.
and clean and polished, and exactly.
But maybe it'll also start sneezing and coughing like I do.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I said, that's, if I am creating any content of whatsoever, I want to create the content as I am.
Yeah.
And also I hate editing.
Yeah.
Okay,
right.
that's
Yeah.
We'll be right back. You can hear the rest of this conversation in just a moment.
You know, you've seen Dale Hardware's logo even if you've never been to Dale Hardware. Do you want to know why? Because they sponsor everything. Every stupid little league, every concert in the park, every single podcast about Fremont whose editor has a low voice. So if you support Dale Hardware by going in and buying things for yourself, they can keep supporting the community. The same way their buckets, full of cement, are supporting the poles that hold up the canopy that cover the car that you're working on in the driveway.
If you're looking for a real estate agent that puts you first, look no further than Jennifer Petroselli with Petroselli Homes Realty Group. Owned by a father-daughter duo, John and Jennifer Petroselli have been serving the community for almost 2 decades. They are known for educating their clients throughout the buying or selling process, anticipating their questions and concerns, and keeping their best interests in mind. If you need help navigating the local real estate market, contact Petroselli Homes on Niles Boulevard.
And now, back to our conversation.
Well, I think, exactly. I think one of the things that I've said for a while is that I think that technology, and specifically regarding social media, that social media gives you promises of things that we really desire. Like, for instance, if we want friends and you're on Facebook and you have, 1,000 friends, in that moment, like when you see people liking an image or a post or something like that, you feel good because you feel like I've got friends. But then when you're really in a human, when you're in a dark place as a human being, or you're going through a tragedy or going through a crisis, you feel like you have no friends. And so there's kind of like the promise of friendship. There's a promise of a community. But ultimately, the social media platforms, technology platforms, they fall short of what it means to actually have a true human interaction, a true human relationship with someone. And so I do think, I think that there's definitely a place for social media. Like I think there's a lot of value in it as a tool, but I do think it is just a tool. If it becomes our life, it becomes our community, it becomes everything we do, we're going to experience some of the amazing things that it offers. But on the flip side, we're also going to experience some of the devastation that it brings with it as well, just as much. And so I do think that, as a content creator, as someone who uses multiple platforms and stuff like that, I think that's something that we have to realize, that it is just a platform. It is just a tool.
I think, see, we are probably at that point, never before in history, that we have so many friends, so many connections, but we feel so
Absolutely.
alone, right? And it has nothing to do with our connections.
Right.
I mean, they're not doing anything.
Yeah.
It's that, and COVID adds to it. Mm-hmm. Personally, I can tell you my part. So I was a person who connected with a lot of people. So when I came to the US, 2000, so I knew people. It was like in my head, from which school they went to, who was connected to them, and I had a whole set of people, and that's how I was. And over a period that changed, and I still kind of question if it's because I started using social media more. So as a content creator, I asked myself that. And COVID, that happened. So you were like 2 years in that.
Yeah.
And I find it very difficult to connect with new people now. Right? There's a mind block. There's a problem.
That's true.
I don't have any problem creating content, putting it out there, talking to people, but in person, connecting with people, that's a mind block. There's a problem. And I'm trying to get over it as I can. Like we're meeting, we have not met before.
Yeah.
So so that was also one reason I want to reach out, just saying that, I want to talk to people. I mean, it's important that we connect with total strangers that we have not known and talk to them about anything.
Right.
Without any agenda.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the one of the things that that inspired me to start the Fremont podcast is that, and I've said this so many times, and if someone's a regular listener and they've heard me say this before, but Fremont is such a beautiful and diverse community, beautifully diverse, and the diversity feeds into its beauty, right? But sometimes we find our little pockets of people that we spend time with, and that's also really good, like to have our close friends in our community that makes us feel like we're at home. But because of the diversity, sometimes it's a lot harder to cross over to somebody who has a different background than I do, someone who has different interests than I do, or different familiarities or sensitivities than I do. And for me, I actually enjoy, like you, I enjoy having just a conversation without an agenda. Just, I want to get to know you as a person. I want to experience the beauty of your life, and I want to share my life, with you as well. And so I do think that that's something that we are in it's kind of like, what is that called? Symbiotic relationship between like plants and you go out into the woods or out into the hills and you have all these weeds and plants and flowers and trees growing among, all together, and they're all like harmoniously living together. And what we don't realize is actually the nutrients and everything that the other plants need are coming from the diversity of all these other organisms that are planted all around them. And I think that the more that we cross-pollinate with one another, we share that symbiotic relationship with each other in the community. But if we treat our lives kind of like a garden where we just plant one thing, we have to constantly nurture it and take care of it. And we might actually have some really amazing fruit or, produce that we grow from it. But ultimately, in the end, we're doing a lot of work to just try to maintain that one crop that we're trying to grow. And I think that's where we miss out on the beauty of like that cross-pollination of all the different elements in what, in the environment around us.
Yeah. In social media, you typically have connections, right? That's what you call it, friends or however it is. So it's basically connections. But the commonality is only reveals itself when you meet and talk to people. I mean, even if it's one-on-one conversations online, that's fine. At least you're connecting with one person, right? And I tried doing that as well. And last about 3 weeks back, I kind of said that I'm open for conversations, and I put a Calendly, and I spoke to 22 total different strangers in a period of 5 days, morning till afternoon. So after getting laid off, I was missing meetings. I never knew that I would miss it, but I was missing because you get up in the morning, you drop your kid, you go to gym, you come back, you have all this time, and then you are not getting into a meeting. And I said, and see, this is where the things that you did not want to do in your life become so important to your life when you don't have them anymore, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Even things like meeting.
Yeah.
Forget about people, even meetings, right?
Yeah.
And I connected with these people, and I had 4 and 5 half-an-hour conversations. Some went on to 1 hour. And I found there was so much that I had in common with these people. And the different strangers who spoke to me had so much in common.
Yeah.
And you feel, you have a sense of hope after that. It's very important. And with Fremont, as you rightly said, with the kind of people that inhabit this space, right? I moved here in 2008. We bought a house and moved here in 2008. There was a Barnes & Noble, was a Border. We used to have the Fremont Literature group or writing group or something. I think they're there still now. I don't know. But we used to meet at Borders. I think that was Borders where that's next to the FedEx Kinko's place. I think they had. So we used to have reading.
Yeah, I think there was.
Yeah, Borders or Barnes & Noble. So we used to have regular reading sessions over there. People used to be there. I knew some people. And then everything started going. And meeting also, if you call someone, why is the question, right?
Yeah.
There are things in life which don't have a why.
Yeah, right. That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, some things are just naturally... They're intangible in its value. Like we can't really put a price tag on certain things. It's like, why is it that when I meet with these particular people and I do these certain things and I have the habit of going to this particular place, why is it that when I miss out on that, why do I feel like that I'm missing a part of something that's truly valuable in my life? And it's because we try to really invest in the things that I think that we can put a tangible value to. This particular item is valuable to me because of this. But when we start, I was actually just talking with someone yesterday, another person that I was talking to, my neighbor, got laid off recently. And I was asking him about his job and stuff. And they said, we've considered moving out of town and moving out of state even, just because the cost of living and everything. But then we started thinking about our community here. We started thinking about the friendships that we have. And although we might be able to have a better situation when it comes to like cost of housing or cost of gas or whatever, there's like this whole other element of community that would really just kind of gut the joy and the life the livelihood of our experience here in Fremont, and I do think that sometimes we underestimate the value of community, and to the point where I think we're often deceived into thinking that the community that we really want is something that we can find online.
I was having a conversation with my friend the other day, and I was just telling, I was saying, I don't really have a big community here. I've lived here for 24 years, but I've not built a community. I mean, I know a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I was telling this friend of mine whom we went to school together, and he lives in Santa Clara, and I live here. But what we used to meet every weekend at someone's house when kids were small. There were things that we had to do. Now kids have grown up, they've gone into college, and we've got older than before, and probably that's why we don't meet that often, and there are no events. And I think this might have that 2 years gap would have had something to do with it. And I was saying, today, if I want to leave this place, I don't regret, I said. And I feel bad about it.
Yeah.
I've lived in a place for 24 years, and if I don't feel bad, leaving this place tomorrow, then what does that 24 years mean to me?
That's a really great question.
I mean, there might be something, but in that context of you've lived in a place for 24 years of your life, and you don't regret, you don't miss, you know that you're not going to miss anything when you leave here. It's very sad.
Yeah, that's good.
Right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's sad. It might be a very profound question that people need to really look at what's important. So I said, okay, 24 is gone. I can't get it. But next, how many years I have, that I'm going to change. Right? That's something I could do.
Yeah.
And that means local community.
It does.
It means San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah.
Even that is too big.
Yeah, right.
You come back to the Alameda County. If that's big, come back to Fremont. And that's when I started really coming and checking what's happening around,
Yeah.
And either I have lost touch of it. I don't know. There is this, and
Yeah. You grew up in India, or you're from India?
I grew up in India. I grew up. I lived in Dubai. I lived in different places, and then India. I left India in '99.
Okay. And you did some of your education in India.
Yeah,
as far
I did
as
all my education.
All of your education. Okay, yeah. So I'm actually gonna go out on a limb here and ask you a question. I have a lot of friends, like you were talking about, if I leave the community, if I leave, Fremont or this area, what do I miss? And I think there's also a flip side of that too, like who's going to miss you if you leave? So there's like a mutual...
Very true.
Yeah, there's a mutual perspective on that, I think. So we've considered our street, and if anybody on my street is listening to this, I don't know that they do, but if they do, then I'm talking about you. I love you guys. But talking about my street, and we've actually talked about my wife and I and my family. I have two sons, one's 10 and one's 10 months old. We've been able to build, especially through COVID, we've been able to build a good community on our street and friendships amongst the adults and the kids. A lot of them are from India, and that's something that we've really enjoyed to get to know. These families that have backgrounds of coming from India. But one of the things that I'm curious about, and I was just having a conversation with somebody else about this yesterday in a completely different matter. But what is it like for you? Because I would say that the population of Fremont is. I think the biggest population in Fremont is the Indian community.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of... when we moved in 2008 itself, that was the feeling that we had. But we moved to a place where we were the first Indians in that area, in that Shenham or that area. I mean, we were the first people there. Now you have a lot of people coming over there. Yeah. And I always jokingly say, because all the houses over there had only one garage, and it was small houses, like 1,200, and everyone from India wanted huge houses. So I said, maybe that's why people do not. Now they're coming over there, they're breaking off the old houses, they're building out mansions over there. I said, but that's probably...
I'm just curious, because I have wanted to know what it's like. What inhibitions or what true barriers might there be for someone who comes from India to get to know someone like me who grew up in the United States? Like, what are some of the cautions, and what are some of the things that you find are that might prevent you from reaching out to someone like me or someone from a different country or a different nationality? But I'm specifically thinking about people I grew up in the United States. I was born in the Midwest, grew up on the East Coast, and so California is new to me within the last 9 years. But from my perspective, if I try to reach out to somebody from India, I'm trying to figure out what is it that I need to know to help them feel safe with me, feel comfortable with me, to build those relationships. But what are some of the things that from my perspective I just am clueless about or I don't understand? And then from your perspective, are you more inclined, I'm throwing all these questions out at once, but are you more inclined to gravitate to somebody from India if you're trying to build a friendship or have a friendship or something like that? Or or if you and I were to, like, let's just say we committed to, meeting once a week and we wanted to become friends, like, what would be some of the cautions or some of the hesitation that you might have in an invitation like that?
See, I don't even think the reason I say don't miss is not even because of Indian or Asian or anything like that. I don't think I have, because I've not lived all my life there.
Okay.
I used to be in the UK, I used to be in Dubai, I used to be here, I used to be in DC, then moved over here. I'm not a community person within the Indian community either.
Sure. Okay.
So it might be a very personal thing rather than something that can be generalized in any way, But there are some. So I have friends who are from other races. I mean, friends in the sense, people that I call and talk who have worked with me, and I feel so good after that. I mean, that's all I say. And these are not necessarily people who studied with me or people from India or anything like that. Like Jeff is one person I call up, and we have never worked in one office, but we worked in one company for some time. But then we met once, and then every now and then we call, But he's not here; he's somewhere. So he's my age, probably. So he's also gone through ups and downs in the United States, and there's so much common that I have with him. So it has nothing to do with...
So the culture, the kind of like the national culture is not necessarily...
No, that is not at all. So when I say... And when I say I won't miss when I leave this place, doesn't mean I don't love anyone over here, right?
Sure.
So that's... So many times when we say something, we have to take this extra effort to re-clarify ourselves before things go out of the hand, right? So it's not... Like, the people living next to us, our neighbors on the right, left, front, they're not from India. None of them.
Yeah.
And we've been close together. We used to have neighborhood parties, and we used to, in fact, my neighbor Curtis. So Curtis is not there now, but we had removed the backyard planks out on both these places,
wow.
I could walk to that side and they could walk here.
Okay.
And we had this. So we had this 3 houses, and then backyard was something that we could move to other places.
That's awesome, yeah.
And this was all like 2010, 2011 and all, right?
Yeah.
But after that, everything in that place kind of became... We lost some people. We lost, I think, 1, 2, 3... 3, 4 people passed away there,
Wow. Wow.
It was so those things have happened, and then so it's never the question that you asked. I understand what you're saying, but I think I have not had any problem with from where they are, because yes, when you work in the tech industry, when you work here, you tend to work with a lot of Indian people, and that's been an experience on a professional level for true. But maybe I didn't have anything outside the professional thing to really kind of connect with people, right? I used to be in the director board of San Jose Poetry Center for about a year.
Yeah.
So we used to go there. So I connect with those people even now. But then there are no Indian people over there. I mean, they're all from different backgrounds,
Yeah.
I used to feel at home when I'm there.
Yeah.
It's interests and not the culture and people. I am not finding people who share the same interest as me. So that's where I'm getting lost, because this place is becoming too much uninteresting for me. Not the people. It's not the people. It's just that there are no common interests that I can latch on to with people.
That's good. I appreciate that. I appreciate you taking the effort to try to answer that. I do think interests are a big thing, because I know that recently I had on the podcast a lady from Russia who was a mathematician, and I think her episode just came out a couple weeks ago. But we discovered that some of our interests were the same, and although she grew up in Russia, and had interests that were developed there in her experience, I found that in talking to her, I found a lot of common interests that we connected on really quickly, and I thought that was great. So let me ask you about some of your interests, and I know some of those. You're a poet. You just hinted about the fact that you were a head of the Poet Society or whatever it was that you're. And I noticed that you write poems often. I think I found your blog and you had poems that you had written each day or whatever. So poetry is something that you have an interest in. We've already talked about content creation, social media platforms and stuff like that. But you also in your timeline, and I do want you to talk about poetry and what it means to you, but in your timeline that I saw, it seemed like there was kind of like a back and forth. Like I saw, you pursued entrepreneurism, and then you decided at one point to give up entrepreneurism and go to like a normal job. And I think some of those might also have some natural causes as to why that happened, but there also seemed to be like an intentionality as well on your part as to why you did that. Talk to me a little bit about that, the arc, that landscape of your story. Sure. And how do the different components fit in? The poetry, the entrepreneurism. I remember you said, I think on there that you started a blog in 2003, which is interesting because that's about the time I started a blog as well, and that was before Facebook and everybody was writing stuff. So it kind of felt like on the front end, before all the social media, there was a kind of like an element of social media. In a sense, people engaging on a more thoughtful platform. But tell me about tell me about your story, the arcs of your story, the interests that took you from one place to the next.
So I graduated in 93, and immediately after graduation, I searched for a job for about 3 months, and I said that was it, and then I started my own business back then. We used to assemble computers and sell it. Okay. 93, which was a time when India was actually booming in terms of personal computers coming into people and everything. Okay. And I did that for about 4 to 5 years. So I got into that, diversified, tried to do some shrimp farming, it didn't work, some software company. So I was there for 5 years doing business, to be precise. So we did well. We had at some point about 20, 25 people working. Things were fine. And then it did not work. And the reason that when I look back is that so we don't learn finance in college and engineering. So finance was totally out. So that was one reason that I think we did not know how to, and I don't come from a business background. There was no startup incubator. There was no mentorship. There was none of those things.
None of that. Yeah.
So that was done. And I had debt, and I said, this was it. And I went to job. But always at that time also, I had this thought that I'm really an entrepreneur. So I think I went to start working. I worked 1 year in India, and then I went to Dubai. I worked there for 2 years, and I went to UK. I worked that for about a few months, and then I came to the US. I worked here for about 1 year. But always behind this back of my mind, this thought is that I am an entrepreneur. Which probably impacted me building a career also during this period, because you're always thinking that you're better than every other employee over there. This thing that, I was this guy who used to run this company, and we had people like you working for me. I'm kind of this great guy kind of stuff. Probably that. So when that thing is then, you don't build your career. Yeah. There was so many interests that you had, and you want to move in directions, but it didn't work out. And then in 2003, I went back to business. And I ran that for about 7 years. And 2010 was when I had to tell myself, look in the mirror and say that, you know what? You're not good for this. You cannot do it. You have to quit. It doesn't work for you. You're not made up for this. You're done. Yeah. You put 7 + 5, 11 years into trying to prove yourself that you're good at doing business. That's enough of one man's lifetime. Yeah. And I said yes. And I quit in 2010. I joined into consulting and the workforce and all those things. So this is where I said that I am a failure in business. I wanted to just write that in bold letters and put that. And that's when I got laid off, and I put that a lot of people are saying, why don't you start a business? I said, then no, this is a past of my story. I don't want to do that.
Huh.
But something that I really realized when I got into work is that it was so relaxing, so stress-free.
When you were working for somebody else, or yeah.
Everywhere I work, after the first 1.5 months or so, I did not have more than 3 hours of work in a day because things were so much more easier. Because maybe it had to do with the way I was doing business before, and you had to juggle with a lot of things, and this thing gave a structure for you to do certain things.
Well, I was going to say, I'm right there with you. Actually, I'm finding, as you tell your story, I'm actually finding that there are a lot of things that I think you and I actually do have in common, and we have very similar both interests as well as weaknesses, because I think that when you don't do something well, or when you're aware of your weaknesses, that consumes a lot of your attention. It consumes a lot of your time and energy. And you know, like anything, if you don't know how to do it well, it's just going to take you a lot longer to do it than you would if you were proficient at it, you know? And so I can completely understand what you're saying as far as like feeling relaxed by going to work, because in some sense you're doing the thing that you do best, and you don't have to worry about doing the things that maybe you're not as proficient at.
And I think all these things might be connected. When I'm talking to you, I'm just trying to see. You know, you're living in the Silicon Valley where everyone talks about startups and millions and everything.
Yeah.
And you came here at probably the right time. And I graduated in 93, which was probably the best time to graduate in the last 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
If you really look, 93 was a time when everything was happening. Good everywhere kind of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then when you look back, and I've told this in my podcast as well, you know, when I look back, I think, okay, right. Then it's a big crime to say that you're not entrepreneurial living in Silicon Valley, because everyone wants to be an entrepreneur or is an entrepreneur or says they're an entrepreneur, and everyone thinks they can save the world through their entrepreneurship skills. I'm not saying it. But to come out and say that, no, I am not like that. And live in the place where everyone is like that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's also something that I sometimes feel, you know what? Maybe yes. But then wherever I have worked, I've done a good job. I've created relationships, friendships, connections at work. I've been able to deliver. And I said, you know what? That's interesting. So my only goal was to be employable. And remain employable can be a goal.
Yeah.
It can be a good goal.
Yeah, I like that, because I think we give like extra kudos to people who are entrepreneurs, or people to come up with something, you know, out of nothing, you know. And I think that, and I mean, we're always going to do that. I mean, we're always going to be creating new things, but there's also something extremely valuable to somebody who sees their piece of the bigger puzzle as of great value. In other words, they don't have to be everything or have their mind wrapped around, you know, the beginning and the end, the higher level and the lower intimate level of a business, or casting the vision for everything. You know, I actually kind of feel that with the Fremont podcast as well, because I didn't know what this was going to look like when I first started it. I just love talking to people. I love getting to know people. I wanted to meet more people in our community, and I wanted to model what it was like to have conversations with people that perhaps you didn't know, and just get to know people. I had you know, in my mind, I thought, where could this go? And I still have in my mind far more things that this podcast platform could accomplish. But when I get together with my team now, and I don't know that when I started the podcast a year and a half ago, or a little less than a year and a half ago, that I would have said that I have a team. But it's interesting that the team that I have they are so good at what they do. And I was fortunate to come across them. And when I show up to the meetings, yes, it's my podcast. It was my vision and all of that. But when I come into these meetings with my team, I'm just like, I don't have much to contribute to what you guys are already doing. I think you're an amazing editor, and I think you're an amazing writer, and I think you do such a great job as a personal assistant, and whatever. And I think that to me, I look at that and say, I just want to be successful at my part of this small vision, and I know that I have the right people doing what they are doing. And for me, the joy is not necessarily taking credit for owning or having my hand in everything that everybody's doing. For me, it's like I get to do what I actually love doing, and I get to work with people who are actually really good, and I hope they love what they do too. I get to work with them, and we get to do it together. And so I've had, I think more times than not, I have taken my hands off of things because I thought I can't contribute anything more to what my teammate is already doing, and I'm just going to let it go. Let them do their thing, and I could maybe try to tweak it, and at sometimes maybe I'm sure I do, but there's just there's something to being able to do what you love and feeling the stress relieved from you because you are working with somebody else who's doing what they love and they're doing it really, really well. And so I think coming to a point of admission where you can do that is a good thing.
And I think for me, after 2010, life has got much richer. I could really look at it because on a lot of fronts, being an employee, yes, there are risks to it. There are things that are there that you could do in a different way. There's a lot of negatives that you can find in.
Yeah.
But for me, I was able to write more. I was able to create I didn't do any videos before when I was doing business. Mm-hmm. I started creating content. I did my podcast. I did that. But even now I did try twice to try to make that as a career kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I've found out that, we have a certain fabric and we need to know what our fabric is. And my fabric is not that,
Yeah.
I lose the interest in what I'm doing the moment I try to monetize it. And that's a problem that I have.
That's interesting.
It's a very, very hard problem to deal with. And it's a very sad problem to deal with.
That's great.
But I kind of, I felt that. And I've created best of my content when I'm employed elsewhere, and because there's no pressure on me to create something, and that I think has taken me places, which is things I would have never reached if I had been running the business. I would have created a big company. I would have made a lot of money. All those things would have happened. But I got called out to participate in one of the largest literature festivals in Asia in 2018.
Wow.
In 2019, December. And I was there on stage and in the room with authors that I've read when I was a kid.
Wow.
And I have not published a book.
Yeah.
Right? But the podcast, the videos and all those things gave me that opportunity. And I got connected.
Cool.
And personally, I got connected with these people. Mm-hmm. I got an offer to act in a feature film. I went there, always wanted to act in a feature film. Never thought that I would have that opportunity. There was a time during business I tried to create a short movie, but then I did not release it. But then this call just came out of the blue. Went there, I acted, it got released. It was there in Amazon Prime and all those kind of stuff. And I got offers, but then I'm living here. So so these are things that when I let things happen on its own, without me trying to control it, things happened.
Right.
In 2019, I traveled to India. And I traveled for 40 days across my state in Kerala. I spoke in schools. I spoke in colleges, libraries, prison. I spoke to a lot of people because as a professional, I work in the agile space. So I work with in teams and companies to be more agile. That's what I do. As a
I want to ask you about that because I had to figure out what Scrum was.
Okay.
I did not know what that was, but I saw it on your profile, so I had to do a little research. But I want to ask about that in just a minute. Yeah.
So I went ahead and I went across to these people, and my point was to how do you be agile in life? You need to be agile at work and minimal in life. So how do you, and this whole concept of being content, right? How do you be content? And it's different for different people. And when I traveled across my state, I felt I belonged there. Because I've been out of that place for quite a long time, and I've lived across in different parts of the world. But there was always something missing. And when I went there, and then I was planning to go back.
Yeah.
When COVID came. And 2020, April, I was supposed to go back and spend about 6 months over there and look at how it is. But then you have a family, you have your wife, you have kids and all those things. I'm still not ruling out that once my son gets into college in another 2 years, 3 years, and he doesn't need us around him anymore.
Yeah.
That often.
Yeah, because he grew up here, right?
He grew up here. So that's a challenge people like me will always have.
Yeah.
Because if we want to be with our kids, we have to live in that place, right? And we cannot take them there. Now, there is an ideal space that we have, which is 6 months here, 6 months there, what it is. And there is a lot of practical issues in how it is possible and not possible. But then you start finding once kids go into college and then you are free by yourself, your life takes into a next stage, you know. And that stage is when you need to be somewhere when you want to. It doesn't matter where you are at that moment.
Sure.
But you want to be at some other place, and then you have to be able to do, which means you need to have money.
Right.
You need to be having the health to travel. You need to have to do something in that thing. So these are things I'm trying to figure out,
Yeah.
I've got about 2-3 years to kind of figure out these things.
Yeah.
Now.
That's cool. I think that I do think it's interesting how like the journey of our lives really kind of reshape our focus and kind of give us insight into things of value that maybe we didn't have before, or vice versa. Things that I thought were important earlier are not as important now, but things that are now important to me were things I would have never thought of before, or whatever. But I think it's interesting, your journey of life, going from being an entrepreneur, self-employed, to being working for a business, and then seeing the values in both of those, and even attempting it more than once, and discovering that the value. I think that you're probably right at a great space in your life where you're going to start looking back and really like processing so many things that you've learned over that time. You probably are, you're probably engaging in these platforms and kind of like really putting content out there at the right time in your life. And especially if you're in the middle of trying to figure out what's the next 2 to 3 years look like for me, and where is it that I'm going to spend, the best quality of time, for the next half of my life, So I do want to ask you about, is it Agile and Scrum?
Scrum.
Is it so? But you went to school for engineering, right?
I went to school for engineering, and I graduated as a very, very bad electrical engineer. And I know you've been in electrical, right? I cannot get my head around. I don't know how. And I graduated and I got good marks, and that's when I figured out. I don't know. I was good at studies.
Yeah.
And when you're good at studies, this is what you did.
Yeah.
And I didn't have any passion whatsoever. So if someone had told me, okay, you don't want to do engineering, what else do you want?
Yeah.
I would have looked at them blank. I didn't have anything.
Yeah.
And I tell my son right now, sometimes, I'm so happy that you have interests in your life. I did not have any interest whatsoever when I was your age.
Yeah.
And Yeah, electrical.
Cool. Yeah,
yes.
yeah. No, so I'm just curious, how did you get into like team building or agile? What is agile? What is Scrum? And how did you get into that? And I'm wondering how much your experience in your own life has affected how you view like teamwork, if I understand agile and Scrum correctly.
Yeah. It's so 2010 I was looking at doing something and I knew I was not employable.
Yeah.
So that's what happens when you're in business for quite a long time.
Yeah,
and you've been doing a certain thing, you become very unemployable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the question was that what could you do? And there was there's a friend of mine who was doing this at that time, and then he had told, and I put the resume on whatever I could get, and everything that I put in the resume at that point of time was true, but sometimes you have to. I always say, you have to recreate your past for the future that you want. It's not lying.
Yeah.
It's basically there's so much experience that you have done in your past. For me, that was about 17 years, and you have to pick and choose the elements from those 17 years that make a difference for your future.
Yeah, it's almost like they say history repeats itself.
Yeah.
If history repeats itself, then why not get ahead of the game and actually plan on that repetition,
right?
on that
exactly.
repeating.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's interesting.
And so some of the skills that I had at that point of time was I worked with teams, I worked with customers, I worked with this. I have done sales, I've done project management, so I've done all these things at various stages. So that's how I projected myself in project program management, and I didn't have any certifications, nothing. But then I had this experience of running a company which did projects, so I was able to do it. So that's what got me into it. And Agile is a frame. It's an umbrella where there are a set of processes, and Scrum is one of the most popular framework within it.
Yeah.
It's a framework. It's a pretty simple way of they started doing software development, and then now that whole thing is being used for every kind of. They're trying to. It's doing small chunks of work in time boxes, like 1 week, 2 weeks. So in very simple. So recently I started a YouTube channel now called Penpositive. It's basically, there's a lot of people who have negative thoughts about Scrum also. So I said, I want to listen to the negative thoughts, and I want to see Scrum is something that has helped me do a lot of these things in my personal life. And I wanted to bring that. So I'm bridging the gap between using that as a professional thing to something that individuals can start using. Yeah. And so in very simple terms, it's just that you decide what you want to do, and then all the set of 100 things that you want to do, and take the 10 things or 5 things that you can do in the week, start on Monday. Every day morning, you ask 3 questions. What did I do yesterday? What am I going to do today? What impediments do I have in doing what I'm doing today? And then try to solve those impediments and do that. And then you do that on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Yeah. And then midweek, you see how much of that 5 has done. And then on Sunday, you kind of decide that, okay, you do a retrospective. What happened? Okay, you decided that you would do 10 items and you only did 7. So only commit for 7 in the next week.
Wow.
Don't commit for 10.
Yeah.
And then you can have a stretch to do another 8 if you want. And over a period of time that goes. And it's just a very simple thing that you do. That's what I do at work.
Okay.
And the value that you asked that I bring in is because there's so much hidden, unwritten value that I cannot really quantify to a company, what I've gained over the period, and the role of a that I work is not a role that needs about 30 years of experience. Okay, and the value that I give when I work with these teams are also not quantifiable, but I understand things better, and this is where I always tell people, if you ask is there ageism within companies, maybe not consciously, but subconsciously there is a bias towards age. And what companies are missing out is, and this is a problem not just with the companies, it's also a problem with people who are getting older. So they want to be at a top title which says that, okay, right, you are 50 years, so you have to be a VP, you have to be a director.
Yeah.
But imagine a situation when people who have all these experience, not about age, so all these experience, they come back at a way different level within the organization. All the experience is now completely flushed into the boardrooms, to the CEOs and people like that, not to the people who are working. So imagine a company which has a lot of young talent, and you have these 50, 60-year-old people who would come and start immersing themselves into the organization of the 20s. And there is obviously going to be a friction of some sort.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But I can guarantee you that these 20-somethings are going to be better 30-somethings when 10 years have passed, because they would have learned even things that they should not be doing
in
their career.
Yeah, that's really good.
So I think that's the unwritten, unquantifiable value that I personally feel good about.
Yeah.
Whether the company realizes or not.
Yeah.
I think I give that value.
That's great. Wow, that's really cool. I love so many things that you just said are so good, and I'm going to take those away and think about them a little bit. That's really cool. I'm going to wrap it up here, but I think you said at one point, if I didn't misunderstand you, you said you weren't a published author, but I thought you were a published author.
I'm self-published author.
Self-published author. Okay. That's all right. That's all right.
You know, I wrote a novel in 2010 as part of the National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo.
Yeah.
Which is, November, 30 days, 50,000 words.
Okay.
So that's a kind of goal.
Nice.
So I did that, but I never published it because as I said, editing is something that I'm very scared about, and proofreading. But this year I said that I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna make that into both English and Malayalam that I do.
Yeah.
But I'm now thinking, should I actually publish it, or maybe I'll just do a podcast of it?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I listen to audiobooks now.
Yeah.
Why would I want to publish this and get it? Because there's still a published author is kind of still, you know, you write yourself as a published author.
Yeah.
But, and there is obviously people consider a weight for that. You know?
Yeah.
But I can do that without publishing. I could serialize it as a blog. I could serialize it in a podcast.
Absolutely.
I think that reaches more people.
I think so. I think, people are used to, and I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but people are used to having things broken down into smaller and more accessible, elements, whether it's, an article, a blog post, even down to like, people are used to Twitter, so they're used to a lot fewer characters. But then audiobooks and podcasts, listening to them instead of having to sit down and actually read it in front of you is also an advantage for where we are.
Because serializing of novels in a magazine is something that has been there for quite a long time.
Yeah.
Now, if you replace magazine with podcast, you can serialize it.
Sure.
Obviously, if it's a book that I have written, I don't need to ask permission to anyone. Right. And I can do that, and I can try it out, and maybe then I could take my writing career to a different space, because the biggest challenge is proofreading. I don't need to do proofreading here. I can write every week one chapter, and I can read that chapter
absolutely
in that, and I can keep doing it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Right?
That's cool.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fun. I really enjoyed this. Are you going to be employed soon, or what's the? I mean, I don't.
Yes.
You don't have to give me all your.
No. That's something that people ask, and I always. So I've got some runway. So that's at the end of the day, that's the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Market is not that good,
right?
But when I told people that I got laid off, there were people who came out. People who knew me, who reached out, and they said, but I had planned a trip to go to India in June.
Okay.
So which means that I have to tell that to people when I take a role. So I am working on some opportunities,
sure.
But I think I would probably maybe even if any decision happens, I would get back into the workforce only end of June.
Okay.
And so. I would probably, and I see when looking for a job, I always tell people, there are a few things that will make us. So how does it allow us to be more employable. Titles, I don't have any problems. Money, I know what my expenses are, and I am not in the high bracket of salary of the Silicon Valley. And then what kind of job? I don't have any preferences because I consider my job as a 9 to 5 something where I create value. If I know I can create a value end of the day and I feel good about what I'm doing, I don't care what kind of job it is.
That's cool.
So these are only the 3 things that actually stop you from doing things. And I think, so that's why I'm confident that something will work out,
Wow. Well, I think you dropped some really good wisdom in this conversation. I've been really grateful for your openness, your freedom on sharing this. If other people who are listening to this are interested in hearing more from you, what are some of the immediate platforms? What are the places that they can find some of your content?
I think there's so many places that I go there, and I now tell people, I mean, someone recently told me, you're there all over there, right? It's too difficult to follow you. I said, that's fine. I mean, you just search Vinod Narayan on Google.
Yeah.
So one of the things that
I did do that last night because I want to see what came up. Yeah. And those, your social media, your YouTube, your blog, LinkedIn. In 2000, I was in Dubai and I had a customer who came to me and said that, you know what, I have booked the domain name. I said, oh, okay. Why is it? So he said his first name, last name, he took a domain name. I said, that's so weird, I mean, how egoistic a person should be to do that. And then he told me, you know what, this is how people are going to know you tomorrow. Yeah.
And he showed this business card and said that these things are not going to be used. People are going to Google you.
Yeah.
That's what, and this was when Google started coming in 2000.
Yeah.
That night I went and I took vinodnarayan.com. And that was 2000. So now 24 years back.
Wow.
Now you look at Vinod Narayan, you search it on Google, it's always my blog that comes or something from the social media. So yourname.com is probably the best place to find, at least to start it. Vinodnarayan.com is that's where I do all my writing, and I think it has links to every other crime that I committed.
Yeah, that's cool. You've said a couple things in this conversation that have inspired me, and I also know that I follow you on Instagram, and I know that you do regular challenges for yourself or inspiring talks and stuff like that. All of which, and I want to say all, the ones that I remember have been very inspiring and very helpful. So I would encourage anybody listening to this to follow you on Instagram and to check out your YouTube. I do think there's a lot of value that you bring. Your perspective is refreshing, and I do think that it's very helpful to be able to hear somebody who's gone through both the successes and failures of your life, to be able to connect with somebody. And you are right, like you said at the very beginning. Oftentimes we find hope in somebody else's failure because they've actually achieved great success. When in reality, I think for the most of us, when we fail, we need to be reminded that it's okay to fail and maybe end up not necessarily having great success, but realizing that failure is part of. There's actually I wish I could remember it because I was listening to something on, I think it was YouTube or Twitter, but Giannis, who's one of the best basketball players in the NBA right now and plays for the Milwaukee Bucks, he was recently interviewed about when they lost and they were out of the playoffs, and they said, do you feel like this is a failure? And he had such a great answer to that, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but he basically said something along the lines of, what do you mean it's a failure? This is just a necessary step to the next level that I have to go to. In order to be able to experience future success, I have to be able to experience, failure. So it's not a failure. It is actually just a necessary, necessary element to be able to get to where I'm going.
That's exactly how it is, because success is that tiny space between two failures.
Yeah.
As you gain experience, live life fully, and do all these things, because no one is going to stick in that space for quite a long time,
Yeah.
Because even if they are considered to be successful by the entire world, your feeling of success is very momentary.
Yeah, right.
You will be off that space much easier than the rest of the world will even recognize and understand.
That's right. Well, thank you for joining me on the Fremont podcast. And actually, I hope that maybe we can do this again sometime. This would be fun. I've enjoyed it.
It's been fun. I mean, this is probably the second time probably I've gone on another podcast. I've been there before, but but I think this was very interesting because it's very connected with where you are in the present. Because that's very important, and I think that's why. Yeah. And thanks for doing the Fremont podcast, and
we'll see where it goes, and I think that conversations like this are going to continue to inspire me wherever it goes from here. So thank you very much.
All the best.
This episode was hosted and produced by Ricky B. I'm Gary Williams. Andrew Cavett is the editor.
And also, I hate editing.
Yeah.
Okay,
right.
That's a.
Well, I think exactly.
Rachel Prey is the print editor in charge of our newsletter. Scheduling and pre-interviews by Sarah S. Additional reporting by Mark Emmons. Music provided by Soundstripe.com. You can find everything we make, the podcast, our newsletter, and all of our social media links at thefremontpodcast.com. Be sure to subscribe wherever it is that you listen so you don't miss an episode. And if you would, please leave a review on iTunes. Your reviews help other people find this podcast. Join us next week on the Fremont Podcast.
This is a Muggins Media podcast.